He opened his eyes slowly, expecting to see the same white ceiling he had seen every morning for the past 3 years. The small crack near the fan, the pale sunlight pushing through the curtains, the quiet sound of traffic outside his apartment building. Everything normal, everything safe, but something felt wrong the moment he became fully awake. The air felt heavier than usual. The room was too quiet. Even the fan above him was not moving. And for a few seconds, he could not understand why. His heart was beating so fast, he stayed still under the blanket, listening carefully, trying to find a reason for this strange feeling. And then he noticed it. There was someone standing near his bed. No, not one person, 2 figures, silent and still, watching him. His breath stopped. His body froze. His mind tried to tell him this was a dream, a nightmare, something created by stress or lack of sleep. But the details were too clear, too sharp. The taller figure was a woman. At least she looked like a woman. She had long silver hair that seemed to glow softly even in the dim light. Her skin was pale, but not like human skin. It had a faint blue shine under it. And her eyes were not normal eyes. They were bright silver, calm and focused, studying him. Carefully, beside her stood a little girl, maybe 8 years old, holding the woman's hand gently. The child's eyes were large and curious, glowing faintly like her mother's, and she tilted her head slightly as if trying to understand him. He tried to move, but his body felt heavy, like something was pressing him into the mattress. His throat felt dry. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The little girl was the first to speak. Her voice was soft and strange, like she was learning how to use the words. "Mother, he is awake," she said quietly, and the woman nodded slowly. Her expression did not change. She did not look scared. She did not look angry. She only looked serious, like she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "So this is the human," the woman said calmly, her voice smooth but powerful, every word clear and controlled. He felt cold hearing her speak about him like he was some kind of object, not a person. He finally forced his body to move, pushing himself slightly up on his elbows, his heart racing faster now. "Who are you?" he tried to say, but his voice sounded weak and broken. The woman looked directly into his eyes, and for a second, he felt like she could see every thought inside his mind. "You are safe for now," she replied, ignoring his question completely. And that made his fear grow even stronger, safe from what he thought. And then something even more terrifying caught his attention. He quickly looked toward his bedroom door, but the door was not there anymore. The wall where it should have been looked smooth and untouched, like the door had never existed. His eyes moved toward the window next, expecting to see the morning city outside. But instead of buildings and cars, he saw darkness, endless black space filled with distant stars, cold and silent. His mind refused to accept it. This was impossible. He lived on the 3rd floor of a small apartment building in the city, not in space. He shook his head, trying to wake himself up fully. Maybe he was still dreaming. Maybe he had not opened his eyes properly yet, but the silver-haired woman stepped closer to his bed, and the air around her felt different, almost electric. "This is not your world anymore," she said softly. And the little girl looked at him with something that almost felt like sadness. He felt panic rising inside him now, his hands trembling, his breathing becoming uneven. "What do you want from me?" he asked finally, and the woman studied him for a moment before answering. "You are the key," she said simply, like it was the most normal explanation in the universe. He stared at her in confusion. The key to what? He had never done anything important in his life. He was just an ordinary man with an ordinary job. Nothing special about him at all. The little girl suddenly stepped a little closer, still holding her mother's hand. "We found you," she said softly, just like the prophecy said, and the word prophecy made his skin crawl. This was not normal. None of this was normal. He looked at the woman again, trying to find some sign that this was a joke, some hidden camera, some explanation that made sense, but her glowing eyes remained calm and serious. Before he could ask another question, the room suddenly vibrated lightly. A low humming sound filled the air, and faint lines of blue light moved across the walls like scanning beams. The woman's expression changed slightly for the first time, her eyes narrowing. "They are searching," she said quietly, and the little girl held her hand tighter, fear now visible on the child's face. He felt his stomach drop. Whoever they were not friendly. The woman looked back at him quickly, her voice lower now, but urgent. "Listen carefully. You do not remember yet, but you were once one of us," she said, and his mind went completely blank before he could react, before he could understand what she meant. A deep mechanical voice echoed from somewhere beyond the walls, cold and emotionless. "Target confirmed." And in that moment, he understood one terrible truth. Whatever was happening was real, and his ordinary life had just ended. And if you want to know what happens next in this impossible morning, make sure you subscribe to this channel, because this is only the beginning of something far bigger than he ever imagined. The room stopped shaking as suddenly as it had begun, but the fear did not disappear. It only grew heavier, pressing down on him like invisible weight. The blue scanning lights faded from the walls, yet the deep mechanical voice still echoed inside his mind. "Target confirmed," repeating again and again like a warning he could not escape. The silver-haired woman turned slightly toward the dark window where stars burned in silence, her glowing eyes narrowing as if she was calculating something far beyond human understanding. And the little girl stepped closer to the bed, her small fingers tightening around the edge of the blanket, watching him not with fear now, but with deep curiosity, almost recognition. "You have questions," the woman said calmly, her voice steady even in this strange moment. And he almost laughed at the obviousness of that statement. Of course he had questions, thousands of them, but his mouth felt dry, and his thoughts were crashing into each other too fast to form clear words. He forced himself to focus on the most important one. "Who are you?" he asked again, this time stronger, and the woman finally answered without turning away from the stars. "I am Princess Alira of the House of Valor," she said, her name sounding ancient and powerful, like it carried the weight of history inside it. "And this is my daughter, Lyra." The little girl gave a small nod when her name was spoken, her glowing eyes never leaving his face. Princess Alira continued, "You are not in your world anymore, but you're not far from it either. This is a space between dimensions, a safe fold in reality, temporary and fragile." Her words were simple, but the meaning behind them was enormous, and he struggled to understand how someone could speak about folding reality like it was nothing more than cloth. He shook his head slowly, trying to hold on to logic. "Princess," he repeated, the word feeling strange in his mouth. "Princess of what?" And this time she turned fully toward him, her silver hair moving like liquid light around her shoulders. "Of an empire that no longer exists," she replied quietly. And for the first time there was something else in her eyes, something human, something like loss. She stepped closer to the bed, and the air felt colder around her. "My world was destroyed," she said, not with anger, not with tears, but with calm acceptance. "Our cities burned under a sky filled with enemy ships. Our oceans boiled. Our people fought until there was nothing left to fight for." Her voice did not shake, but the images her words created inside his mind were terrifying. He could almost see it. Massive alien structures collapsing, bright energy beams cutting through the darkness of space, children running through fire, and soldiers falling in silence. "Who did that?" he asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. And Lyra answered before her mother could, her young voice soft but serious. "The Dominion," she said, as if that single word explained everything. Princess Lyra nodded slowly. "The Dominion does not conquer planets for land or resources. They conquer for control. They remove anything unpredictable, anything that can challenge their order." She looked at him carefully now, her silver eyes studying his reaction. "They fear what?" "They cannot calculate," she added. He frowned in confusion. "And what does that have to do with me?" he asked, frustration mixing with fear, because none of this felt connected to his ordinary life, his small apartment, his simple job. Princess Alira's gaze became sharper, more focused. "You are the anomaly," she said. "You are the variable they cannot measure." And those words sent a strange chill down his spine. She raised her hand slowly and without touching him. A faint glow formed between her fingers. A small projection of light appeared in the air above his chest, showing images that made his heart pound faster. He saw a battlefield among the stars, massive alien ships floating like giants in the darkness. And then he saw something impossible, a figure standing in the center of it all, wearing armor that shimmered with both human design and alien technology, energy moving across it like living. Lightning, and when the helmet turned slightly, he saw his own face behind the glass. He stared at the image, unable to breathe. "That's not me," he whispered, but the princess did not argue. "That was you," she corrected gently, "before your memory was sealed, before you chose exile." The word exile struck him like a physical blow. "Chosen," she said, chosen, as if he had agreed to this, as if he had once understood something he no longer could. Lyra stepped closer to the glowing projection, her small hand reaching toward the image of the armored figure. "You promised," she said softly, her voice almost breaking, and he felt something strange inside his chest when she said that, something deep and painful, like an emotion trying to break through a locked door inside his mind. He did not remember making any promise. He did not remember armor, war, or alien empires. But his heart reacted as if part of him did. Princess Alira lowered her hand, and the projection disappeared, leaving only silence between them. "Long ago, your species was studied," she explained carefully. "Humans evolve quickly. Emotionally and intellectually, you adapt to chaos faster than any known civilization. You create under pressure. You fight even when logic says you should surrender." She paused for a moment. "The Dominion saw this as a threat. I saw it as hope." And her words carried more meaning than she was saying directly. "You volunteered to join our alliance project," she continued. "A bridge between species, a symbol that humans and my people could stand together. Your body was enhanced, your mind expanded, but when the Dominion discovered the project, we were forced to act quickly." Her eyes softened slightly. "To protect you, we erased your memories and sent you back to Earth, hidden among billions, ordinary, invisible." And the idea that his entire life had been some kind of hiding place made his stomach twist. The low humming sound returned suddenly, louder this time, and faint cracks of blue light appeared in the air itself. Not just on the walls. Reality seemed to ripple like disturbed water. Princess Alira's expression became serious again. "They are breaking through," she said quietly. Lyra moved closer to him now, instead of her mother, her glowing eyes wide but steady. "They found the key," she whispered. He looked between them, confusion, fear, and something else mixing inside him, something that felt like rising fire. "If I was this powerful before," he asked slowly, "why do I feel like nothing now?" And Princess Alira stepped forward, placing her glowing hand gently above his forehead without touching it. "Because you chose to forget," she said softly. "But forgetting does not erase what you are." Her silver eyes locked onto his, intense and unshakable. "And now you must decide if you will. Remember." The cracks in reality widened behind her, dark shapes forming within them, tall and metallic, stepping closer with silent purpose. And in that growing distortion of space and light, he realized one terrible truth. The princess who should not exist had not come to save him. She had come to awaken something inside him that the universe itself feared, and the moment he chose to remember, nothing would ever be the same again. The cracks in the air widened like broken glass hanging in slow motion, and through them shapes began to move, tall figures made of dark metal and sharp angles, their bodies smooth but unnatural, their faces hidden behind blank masks with a single red line glowing across where their eyes should have been. The low humming sound turned into a deep vibration that shook the floor beneath the bed, and he felt fear rising again. But this time the fear was different. It was mixed with something else. Something restless inside him, like a locked door in his mind, was starting to break open from the other side. Princess Alira did not look surprised anymore. She looked prepared, as if this moment had always been part of her plan, and little Lyra stepped even closer to him instead of running away, her small hand reaching toward his arm. "It is time," she whispered softly, and when her fingers touched his skin, a sudden flash of light exploded behind his eyes. He gasped as images flooded his mind without warning. Not dreams, not imagination, but memories, sharp and painful. He saw a sky that was not Earth's sky, filled with 3 burning suns. He saw towering cities made of crystal and metal, ships moving between planets like silent hunters. And then he saw himself standing in a chamber surrounded by beings that looked like Princess Illyra, but older, wiser, their eyes glowing with serious purpose. He heard his own voice speaking words he could not remember saying, promising loyalty, promising protection, promising to stand between humanity and destruction. The memories came faster now, overwhelming and heavy. He saw machines connecting to his body, strange symbols glowing across his skin, energy flowing through his veins like liquid fire. He remembered pain, but also pride. He had volunteered. No one forced him. He had chosen to become something more than human, something stronger, a bridge between two worlds, because he had believed in something bigger than himself. And the strongest memory of all was not of war or power. It was of standing beside Princess Illyra, her hand resting gently over his, as they watched stars being born from dying suns. He fell forward on the bed, breathing hard, sweat covering his forehead, the room still shaking as the metallic soldiers stepped halfway through the cracks in reality. But he barely noticed them for a moment, because the truth was hitting him harder than fear ever could. He remembered why his memory had been erased. The Dominion had discovered the Alliance project earlier than expected. They had marked him as priority threat one, not because of his power alone, but because of what he represented. A future where humans and Illyra's people could unite. A future the Dominion could not control or predict. Princess Illyra moved closer, her glowing eyes filled with urgency. "You are our greatest success," she said, her voice strong but soft underneath. "Your human mind adapted to our energy faster than any of my people could. Your emotions amplified the power instead of weakening it." She paused as one of the metallic soldiers fully entered the room, its red line, eyes scanning everything instantly. But the Dominion does not fear strength alone. They fear unpredictability, she added, and that word echoed deeply inside him. Unpredictability, that was what humans were known for, the unstable ones, as Lyra had said. Another wave of memory hit him suddenly. He saw the final meeting before exile, alarms ringing across the Crystal City, Dominion ships appearing in orbit, and Princess Illyra standing before him with tears in her silver eyes for the first time, telling him there was no other choice. If he stayed, the Dominion would destroy Earth next, because they would search every human world until they found him. So he had agreed to forget, agreed to return to Earth as an ordinary man, his powers sealed, his identity erased, hidden among billions, so the Dominion's calculations would fail. A sharp metallic sound snapped him back to the present as the first soldier stepped fully into the room, its body shifting shape slightly, adapting to the environment, a weapon forming from its arm without visible parts moving. Princess Illyra raised her hand, and a barrier of blue light formed between them and the intruders, sparks flying as the soldier fired a beam of red energy that crashed against the shield, the force of it pushing her slightly backward. And for the first time he saw strain on her face. "You must awaken fully," she said quickly, her voice strained but determined. "The seal on your power is breaking, but you must choose to release it." Her eyes locked onto his again, intense and unshakable, and he realized something terrifying. Even now, after everything, she was not forcing him. She was waiting for his decision. The power inside him was not something she controlled. It was his, always had been. Lyra stepped beside him, her small glowing hand pressing against his chest, directly over his heart. "You are not just theirs," she said softly, meaning not just alien, you are human too. And something about those simple words cut deeper than all the visions and war memories combined. He remembered Earth now too, remembered his quiet life, the people he had smiled at on the street, the normal days that felt meaningless before but now seemed precious. He understood the truth clearly. He was not meant to become alien. He was meant to become something new. The Dominion soldiers pushed harder against the barrier, cracks of red lightning spreading across Princess Illyra's shield, more dark shapes appearing in the broken air behind them. Time was running out, the humming sound turning into a violent roar, and inside his chest the sealed energy felt like a storm trying to break free. burning and alive, waiting for permission. He closed his eyes for a single second, not in fear, but in acceptance. He remembered the promise he had made long ago, not just to Illyra, not just to her people, but to humanity itself, that he would protect both worlds from destruction. When he opened his eyes again, they were no longer the same dark brown they had always been. A faint silver light flickered within them, matching the glow of the princess and her daughter, but stronger, deeper, more unstable. The air around him began to distort slightly. Small objects in the room, lifting a few inches off the ground as gravity itself seemed confused. Princess Illyra felt the change immediately and lowered her shield slightly, hope flashing across her face despite the danger. He remembers, she whispered softly, almost to herself. The nearest Dominion soldier paused for the first time, its red eye flickering rapidly as if recalculating probabilities. Its mechanical voice spoke again, cold and controlled, threat level rising. And he slowly stood from the bed, no longer feeling weak, no longer feeling like an ordinary man caught in something too big for him. The memories were not fully clear yet, but the power was real, alive inside his veins. And as the metallic soldiers adjusted their weapons toward him, he realized that the exile was over, the hiding was finished, the human who had forgotten was gone, and something far more dangerous had taken his place. And this time he would not run. The moment he stood fully on his feet, the room could no longer pretend to be a bedroom. The illusion of normal walls and familiar furniture shattered like thin glass, revealing the truth behind it. They were standing inside a fractured pocket of space barely holding together, pieces of his apartment floating like broken memories around them, the bed drifting sideways, the ceiling cracked open to endless stars. And beyond the torn edges of reality, the Dominion soldiers stepped forward in perfect silence, their metal bodies reflecting cold starlight, their red scanning lines locking directly onto him, as if you're the only object that mattered in the universe. Princess Illyra dropped the weakening shield completely and moved in front of Lyra, but she did not move in front of him. She knew now that she did not have to. The air around him vibrated harder, invisible waves pulsing outward from his body, distorting light and sound. And even the Dominion soldiers paused for a fraction of a second as their systems struggled to measure the sudden change. "Stand down," one of the soldiers said in a voice that was neither male nor female, only mechanical and empty. "You are designated anomaly. Surrender and dimensional collapse will be avoided." The words were spoken like a simple instruction, like asking someone to turn off a machine, but something inside him reacted violently to the word surrender. It felt wrong, unnatural, like trying to erase the very idea of being human. And before he could think, before he could plan, he felt his hand lift, slightly on its own, energy gathering around his fingers like invisible fire. The first blast was not controlled. It was instinct, a sudden burst of bright silver light exploding outward in a shockwave that tore through the nearest Dominion soldier, the metal body cracking and splitting apart as if gravity itself had reversed direction inside it. Pieces of dark alloy scattered into the empty space behind them, floating lifeless and silent, and the force of it pushed him backward slightly, his heart racing not from fear now, but from shock at what he had just done. He stared at his own hand, faint lines of glowing symbols appearing across his skin before fading again, and Princess Illyra watched him with a mix of pride and deep concern. "Your human heart amplifies it," she said quickly, her voice steady despite the chaos. "But you must control it, or it will consume you." There was no time to answer because 3 more Dominion soldiers moved at once, their bodies phasing in and out of visibility, adapting rapidly. Learning from the first one's destruction, beams of concentrated red energy fired toward him in perfect formation, calculated to hit from different angles, leaving no safe path to dodge. This time he reacted with thought instead of instinct, the memories still forming in his mind guiding him without full explanation. He raised both hands and felt the energy respond differently, not exploding outward but bending, twisting around him like a protective field. The red beams struck the silver barrier and dissolved into sparks that scattered harmlessly, but the impact shook him deeply. pain flashing through his arms, as if his nerves were learning how to handle something far beyond human limits. Lyra's small voice cut through the noise. "Do not fight like them," she shouted. "Fight like you." And her words somehow made sense even in the middle of war. The Dominion soldiers changed tactics again, one of them extending its arm into a long blade of vibrating energy, charging forward faster than human eyes could normally track. But he saw it clearly. Time itself seeming slower around him, he stepped aside at the last second and grabbed the soldier's arm, feeling cold metal under his fingers, and instead of destroying it with force, he focused on the energy inside it. He felt its structure, its patterns, its artificial logic, and then he did something the Dominion had not predicted. He disrupted it from within, not by overpowering it, but by introducing chaos into its system. The soldier froze instantly, its red eye flickering wildly, its body shaking as conflicting signals overloaded its control core, and within seconds it collapsed into lifeless fragments, not shattered but shut down, like a machine that no longer understood its own commands. The remaining soldiers hesitated again, their movements less confident now, recalculating, searching for new solutions, but for the first time the calculation was failing. Beyond the broken edges of the pocket dimension, larger shadows appeared, massive shapes moving in the darkness of space, Dominion ships arriving in orbit above Earth, their forms enormous and silent. And even though they were far away, he felt their presence like pressure on his mind, scanning, analyzing, marking the planet as a possible battlefield. Princess Illyra looked upward toward the distant fleet, and her expression hardened. "They will not retreat now," she said quietly. "You have confirmed their fear." And he understood what she meant by fighting back. By awakening, he had proven that humanity was no longer just a background species in the galaxy. One of the remaining Dominion soldiers transmitted something unseen, a silent signal pulsing outward, and moments later the fractured pocket space around them began collapsing faster, reality stitching itself back together in unstable waves, gravity pulling the floating pieces of his apartment violently back into place, walls reforming, the ceiling closing, the stars fading, until suddenly they were standing once again inside his room. But the window now showed Earth's sky, and far above it, faint but visible, dark shapes moved against the clouds. Sirens began to echo faintly from the city outside. Distant but growing louder. People were noticing, governments were noticing, satellites were detecting unknown objects in orbit. And this was no longer a hidden conflict inside a folded dimension. This was first contact, and it had already become more. The last Dominion soldier in the room stepped backward toward a fading crack in the air. Its red eye fixed on him without emotion. "Escalation authorized," it said coldly before disappearing completely. Silence filled the room for a brief second, broken only by his heavy breathing, the faint glow in his eyes slowly dimming but not disappearing. Princess Illyra lowered herself slightly, steadying Lyra with one arm, and looked at him not as a stranger now, but as something far more dangerous and far more important. "You have chosen," she said softly, and outside, high above the clouds, the first Dominion ship began descending toward Earth's atmosphere, its dark shadow stretching across the sky like the beginning of an eclipse, and he realized with terrifying clarity that this was no longer about survival inside one room. This was about a planet that had no idea it had just been declared a battlefield, and he was standing at the center of it. The sky above the city changed before most people even understood what they were looking at. At first, it was only a dark shape moving behind the clouds, something too large and too still to be an airplane. Then the clouds began to swirl unnaturally around a single point, like the air itself was being pulled upward, and within minutes, every phone in the city started vibrating with emergency alerts. News channels cut their programs. Cameras zoomed into the sky, and millions of eyes turned upward, in confusion and growing fear. From his apartment window, he could now see it clearly. A massive Dominion vessel descending slowly through the upper atmosphere. Its surface black and smooth like polished stone, no visible engines, no flashing lights, only a faint red glow running along its edges like a heartbeat. Princess Illyra stood beside him, her face calm but tense, and Lyra pressed close to her side, watching the human world with wide, silent eyes. "They do not strike immediately," Aelira said quietly, as if explaining a pattern she had studied for years. "They calculate resistance first." And he understood what that meant. The Dominion would test Earth, measure its defenses, its weapons, its unity. And if the result was weakness, they would erase it without hesitation. Military jets screamed across the sky within minutes. Missiles launching from distant bases, radar systems locking onto the alien ship, governments reacting exactly as humans always did when faced with the unknown, with force and urgency. But the Dominion vessel did not dodge or retreat. It simply projected a wide, invisible field around itself. And every missile that entered that space dissolved into harmless sparks before reaching its surface. Jets that flew too close lost control of their systems, engines shutting down midair as if their machines had simply decided to stop working, and panic spread faster than information. He felt it, not just saw it, a pressure in his mind like a distant storm building. The Dominion fleet in orbit synchronizing, scanning the entire planet at once, searching for him specifically, and that realization struck him harder than the sight of the giant ship itself. Earth was not under attack because it was powerful. It was under threat because he had awakened, because he had chosen to remember. "If I had stayed asleep," he said quietly, staring at the descending ship, "they would have ignored Earth." And Princess Aelira did not lie to him. She simply nodded once. Lyra looked up at him, her small voice steady despite everything. "But then they would win," she said, and the simple truth in her words silenced the doubt inside him for a moment. The Dominion ship stopped descending just above the highest layer of clouds, hovering like a silent god above the world, and then a beam of red light shot downward, not toward a city, not toward a military base, but toward the ocean, striking the water with impossible precision. The sea did not explode or boil. Instead, it split apart cleanly, revealing the ocean floor beneath as if gravity itself had been pushed aside. A clear demonstration of power, a message to every nation watching. Resistance was meaningless. Emergency broadcasts filled every screen, leaders demanding answers they did not have, scientists speaking quickly about unknown energy signatures, social media flooding with fear and disbelief, and inside his apartment the air felt smaller than before, heavier, because this was no longer hidden war between advanced beings. This was a global crisis unfolding in real time. "You are still not fully awakened," Princess Aelira said carefully, turning to face him. "What you accessed before was instinct fragments." She stepped closer, her glowing eyes searching his. "If you fight the Dominion fleet in that state, you will burn out before you reach their command vessel." And the idea of fighting something that large, something orbiting the planet itself, felt impossible even with alien power in his veins. "Then teach me," he said without hesitation. And for the first time, there was no confusion in his voice, only determination, because whatever fear he felt was now secondary to the sight of his world being measured like a target. Aelira raised her hands, and faint symbols formed in the air between them, complex but flowing like living equations. "Your power is not only energy," she explained. "It is connection. Human emotion amplifies it. But emotion without control becomes destruction." She paused. "The Dominion believes humans are unstable, chaotic, incapable of discipline. That belief is their greatest miscalculation." And her words carried a sharp edge of confidence. As she guided him, he felt the energy inside him shift from wild storm to focused current, no longer exploding outward randomly, but circulating through his body in balanced waves. He could sense the fleet above Earth now more clearly, dozens of vessels positioned in perfect formation, each one linked to a central command core somewhere within the largest ship. And deep inside that core was an intelligence older than his entire species, calculating every possible outcome. Suddenly, every electronic device in the apartment flickered on at once. Television screens, radios, phones, all displaying the same symbol. A red geometric mark rotating slowly, and then a voice filled the room, translated automatically into human language by unknown means, cold and precise, Planetary civilization identified as secondary obstacle. Primary target has been confirmed active. Surrender of anomaly will prevent planetary restructuring. And he knew instantly who they meant. Outside, across the world, billions heard the same message. Confusion turning into terror as people realized they were being addressed by something not from Earth. Governments try to respond, to send signals, to open communication, but the Dominion did not wait for negotiation. The hovering ship released smaller crafts that descended rapidly toward major cities, not attacking yet, only positioning themselves like pieces on a board. Lyra tightened her grip on his hand now, her glow faint but steady. "They want you to feel responsible," she said softly, "so you will surrender." And she was right. The Dominion understood psychology as well as physics. He looked out at the sky once more, at the alien shapes blocking sunlight, at the ocean still split open in the distance like a wound in the planet, and something inside him settled into clarity. Earth was no longer safe, hiding was no longer possible, and surrender was no longer an option, because if the Dominion erased unpredictability from the universe, they would erase everything that made humanity worth saving. And as the red symbol continued, rotating on every screen across the globe, he understood that the next move would decide not just his fate, but the fate of an entire world that had no idea one ordinary man had just become its greatest weapon and its greatest risk at the same time. The red Dominion symbol faded from the screens as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind only emergency broadcasts and confused reporters. But inside the apartment, the silence that followed felt heavier than the warning itself, because now there was no doubt left. The entire planet had been given a choice that was not really a choice at all: surrender him or face destruction. And he could feel the weight of billions of unaware lives pressing down on his chest. Lyra's small hand was still holding his, her fingers warm despite the cold light in her eyes. And when he looked down at her, something inside him shifted again, not power this time, but recognition. Princess Illyra noticed the change immediately, her expression tightening slightly, as if she knew what he was about to ask before he spoke. "There is more," he said quietly, his voice steady but firm. "You did not tell me everything." And for the first time since she had appeared in his room, the princess hesitated. It was only a second, but it was enough to confirm his suspicion. Lyra looked between them, her glowing eyes flickering softly, and then she released his hand and stepped forward on her own, braver than a child should ever need to be. "He deserves to know," she said gently to her mother, and there was something in her voice that sounded older than her small body. Illyra closed her eyes briefly, as if accepting a truth she had hoped to delay, and when she opened them again, the silver light inside was softer, more personal. "Lyra is not only my daughter," she said carefully, each word chosen with care. "She is yours as well." And the world seemed to narrow into a single silent moment. He stared at her, certain he had misunderstood, but the energy inside him reacted instantly, pulsing sharply through his veins as if confirming what his mind refused to accept. "That is impossible," he whispered, his thoughts racing back through his ordinary human life. There had been no alien princess, no hidden child, no memory of love beyond Earth. But as soon as he tried to deny it, another memory broke through the seal. He saw a chamber filled with soft blue light, not a battlefield this time, but a place of creation, advanced technology floating like gentle stars around a central platform. And he remembered standing beside Illyra, not as strangers, but as partners, their hands intertwined, agreeing to something that went beyond alliance or strategy, agreeing to create a living symbol of unity between their species. Not just a weapon against the Dominion, but proof that coexistence was possible. Lyra stepped closer to him again, her eyes shining brighter now. And when she looked up at him, there was no fear in her expression, only quiet hope. "You helped bring me into existence," she said softly. "Your human being stabilized the hybrid process. Without you, I would not have survived." Her words were simple, but the meaning behind them was overwhelming. She was not an accident of war. She was the future they had once believed in. His mind struggled to catch up with the truth, fragments of erased memory reconnecting rapidly, He remembered holding a newborn child with silver light in her tiny eyes, remembered promising to protect her no matter what happened, remembered the day the Dominion discovered the project and the panic that followed. The decision to erase his memory was not only to protect Earth, it was to protect her, because if the Dominion captured him, they would trace the genetic link and find Lyra. And a hybrid child was something the Dominion would never allow to exist. Outside, the sky darkened further as more Dominion crafts positioned themselves across continents, their silent presence spreading like shadows over major cities, and the tension inside the room grew heavier, because this truth changed everything. He was not only fighting for Earth, not only fighting for Illyria's lost empire, he was fighting for his own daughter, a child who carried both human unpredictability and alien evolution in her blood. "The Dominion knows," Illyria said quietly, breaking through his thoughts. "They discovered Lyra's genetic signature the moment you awakened. That is why they escalated so quickly." Her voice carried no accusation, only urgency. "She represents a future they cannot calculate, a fusion of species that invalidates their entire philosophy of control." And that realization made the Dominion's threat feel even more personal. Lyra reached up and placed her glowing hand against his chest again, directly over his heart. And this time the energy did not surge wildly. It synchronized, a gentle harmony forming between them. And he felt something he had never experienced before, not just power, not just memory, but connection, a living link that confirmed the truth beyond logic. She was part of him. "I did not want you to awaken under this pressure," Illyria admitted softly. "I hope to prepare you slowly, to rebuild trust before revealing this." Her silver eyes met his, vulnerable but strong. But the Dominion forced our hand, and he could see the weight she had carried alone for years, protecting their daughter while hiding across dimensions. The ground trembled faintly as a Dominion transmission pulse swept across the planet again, scanning, searching, narrowing down their exact location, and he understood that time was collapsing around them. The truth had been revealed not as comfort, but as ignition, because now his hesitation was gone. He looked down at Lyra once more, really seeing her for the first time, not as an alien child, not as a symbol, but as his daughter, and something ancient and instinctive rose inside him, stronger than alien energy, stronger than fear, the simple human need to protect family at any cost. "You should have told me sooner," he said quietly to Illyria. But there was no anger in his voice, only resolve, and she nodded once, accepting that truth as well. Above them, one of the massive Dominion vessels shifted position, its underside opening slowly to reveal a core glowing with concentrated red energy, preparing something far greater than a warning strike. And as the sky darkened like an approaching storm, he realized the Dominion had not only come to eliminate a threat, they had come to erase a possibility. And that possibility was standing in front of him in the form of a small girl who should not have been able to exist. And for the first time since he had opened his eyes that impossible morning, his power did not feel unstable or uncertain. It felt focused, because now the war was no longer abstract. It was personal. The massive Dominion vessel above the clouds began to hum with a deep vibration that rolled across the planet like distant thunder, the red core beneath it expanding slowly, gathering energy that bent the light around it, and every screen across the world flickered again as satellites failed one by one, cities below falling into uneasy silence as power grids struggled to understand what was happening in the sky. And inside the apartment, he felt the surge building not only above Earth but inside his own body, the connection between him and Lyra now steady and bright, like two stars locked in orbit around the same heart. Princess Lyra stepped back slightly, not in fear, but in understanding. She knew this moment could not be guided anymore. It could only be chosen, and the Dominion transmission echoed once more across the air. Final directive. Anomaly surrender will preserve planetary assets. Resistance will result in planetary restructuring. The words were cold, mechanical, and certain, as if the outcome had already been calculated and sealed. He walked toward the window slowly, each step calm despite the storm inside him. And for a second he imagined what surrender would mean, stepping forward, allowing himself to be taken into that vast black ship, watching Earth return to normal skies while he disappeared in endless darkness. A single sacrifice to save billions, and the thought almost felt noble, almost logical. But then he felt Lyra's hand tighten in his again, and he remembered something deeper than logic, something human. Humans did not survive by surrendering what made them different. They survived by fighting for it, by protecting family, by choosing hope even when fear felt easier. And he understood that the Dominion's greatest mistake was believing emotion was weakness, believing love was instability, because love did not create chaos. It created courage. The red core in the sky flared brighter, preparing to release a beam powerful enough to fracture continents, a demonstration that would leave no room for negotiation. And at that exact moment, he made his choice, not as a soldier of an alien empire, not as a hidden experiment, but as a human father. He closed his eyes briefly and reached inward, not for rage, not for destruction, but for balance, allowing the alien energy and human emotion to merge fully for the first time without conflict. When he opened his eyes again, the silver light was no longer flickering. It burned steadily, but within it there was something new, faint streaks of warm gold mixing with the alien glow, the air around him stabilizing instead of distorting wildly. Object in the room settling gently instead of lifting uncontrollably. Princess Alira felt the shift instantly, and her breath caught slightly. This was not the power of her people alone. It was not raw human chaos either. It was something neither side had seen before. He stepped forward, and the wall of the apartment dissolved in front of him like mist, not destroyed but parted, and he rose into the sky without force or explosion, simply lifted by controlled gravity, ascending toward the massive Dominion vessel as millions of eyes across the world watched in disbelief, cameras capturing the figure glowing softly against the dark clouds, social media exploding with confusion and awe, governments losing control of the narrative entirely. As he approached the Dominion ship, smaller crafts moved to intercept him, weapons charging with red light. But this time he did not attack them. Instead, he extended his hand and released a pulse of energy that did not shatter or burn. It spread outward in a wave of shifting frequencies, disrupting the rigid synchronization that held the fleet together, not overpowering their systems, but introducing unpredictable variables into their network, forcing their artificial intelligence to confront something it could not model. Inside the central vessel, the Dominion Command Core recalculated rapidly, projections fracturing into impossible branches, outcomes multiplying beyond manageable limits. And for the first time, the fleet hesitated not because of damage, but because of uncertainty. He could feel their confusion like static against his mind, their inability to predict his next move, because his power was no longer purely alien, and his choices were no longer purely strategic. They were human. The red core beneath the main ship destabilized as his energy interfered with its harmonic balance. Not through brute force, but through subtle disruption. He did not try to overpower the weapon. He destabilized the logic controlling it, forcing the system to question its own commands, and cracks of light began forming across the surface of the massive vessel. Not explosions, but fractures and certainty. A final transmission came from the Dominion Command, less confident now. Unquantifiable variable detected. Escalation risk exceeds acceptable threshold, and for the first time there was something like caution in the mechanical tone. He hovered directly before the glowing core and spoke, not shouting, not threatening, but calmly, knowing his words were being translated across the fleet. Humans are not weakness, he said steadily. We are choice. And with that he released a final controlled surge of hybrid energy, not aimed to destroy the ship, but to overload its predictive systems completely, flooding them with emotional variables, forcing the Dominion to confront a future they could not calculate. The red core dimmed rapidly, the massive vessel shifting backward, its formation breaking as ships repositioned defensively instead of aggressively. And slowly, almost reluctantly, the fleet began ascending back toward orbit, retreating not because they were defeated in battle, but because the cost of continued engagement had become unpredictable. Clouds closed again over the sky as the Dominion ships vanished into the darkness of space, leaving behind silence that felt unreal after so much tension. And he slowly descended back toward the city, the gold and silver glow fading gently around him, but not disappearing entirely. Princess Illyra and Lyra waited where he had left them, and when his feet touched the ground, Lyra ran forward without hesitation and wrapped her arms around him. Earth was not destroyed, the Dominion was not eliminated, the war was not fully over. But something had changed permanently in the balance of the universe, because now the Dominion knew humanity could not be calculated or erased so easily. And as he looked at his daughter, and then at the sky that was finally clear again, he understood that being human had never been a weakness to overcome. It had been the greatest power of all, and this time he would never choose to forget it again.